Hello, my dear dreamers, and welcome to Anastasia's Whisper. I'm so glad you're here. Maybe you're curled up in bed, or lying beneath the stars, or listening with one ear tucked beneath your pillow, waiting for sleep to come softly and slowly. Wherever you are in this wide, quiet world, thank you for making space for rest. If this story brings you peace tonight, I invite you to subscribe so you'll always have a place to return to when your mind needs calm and your heart needs hush. And if you feel like it, leave a little note in the comments. Tell me where you're listening from, or just say goodnight. It means so much to know you're out there. Tonight, we journey far to a land of gold and shadow, where the desert wind once whispered through sacred tombs, to ancient Egypt, where kings prepared for death as carefully as they ruled in life, and believed that what they carried with them could shape eternity. So let your breathing slow, your thoughts grow quiet, and your spirit settle like sand. This is What the Pharaohs Took to the Afterlife. When British archaeologist Howard Carter first peered through the opening of a sealed tomb in the Valley of the Kings, he held a flickering candle to the darkness and stared into the past. "Can you see anything?" someone asked behind him. And Carter, his voice barely above a breath, whispered, "Yes, wonderful things." It was 1922. The tomb belonged to a boy king, Tutankhamun, and what lay inside would change the world's understanding of ancient Egypt forever. Golden thrones, ceremonial chariots stacked like puzzle pieces, ivory walking sticks, jars of sweet oils still scented after 3,000 years, shoes embroidered with lotus petals, a dagger forged from meteoric iron, literally crafted from a fallen star. And there, cradled in a box of ebony and gold, a small, delicate lock of hair, believed to be from his grandmother, Queen Tai. This was no simple grave. It was a map, a mirror, a portrait of everything a pharaoh needed to rise beyond death and live forever. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not an ending. It was an intricate transition, a sacred crossing, and to complete that journey, the soul needed help. They believed each person had several spiritual parts. Most importantly, the Ka and the Ba. The Ka was your life force, your spiritual twin. The Ba was your personality, your memories, your essence, the part of you that could fly between worlds. But neither could survive without a place to return to. That place was the tomb. That's why the tomb was built like a living house. It had bedrooms, storage chambers, gardens painted on the walls, full of sycamores, rivers, and lotus blossoms, and hidden compartments for food, clothing, cosmetics, musical instruments, and writing tools. Some tombs even had shelves carved directly into the stone to hold jars of honey and beer, or tiny statues called shabtis, who were believed to come alive in the afterlife and perform labor for the pharaoh. And in the deepest sanctum of all, the burial chamber, stood the sarcophagus, a gilded coffin, often nestled inside multiple coffins, like a sacred puzzle of eternity. But even more powerful than gold were the words painted on the tomb's walls, the spells, the prayers, the maps for the soul. These weren't decorative, they were functional. instructions written in ink and magic, how to pass through the gates of the underworld, how to name the gods, how to keep your heart light and your name remembered. They were drawn from the pyramid texts, the coffin texts, and later from a scroll called the Book of the Dead, which we'll explore in the next part of our journey. Some tombs took decades to complete. Pharaohs began building their final homes the moment they took the throne. They would commission artists, priests, and builders, not for palaces, but for their future in the afterlife. The shape of the tomb mattered too. The earliest kings were buried beneath flat-roofed mastabas, but later pyramids soared skyward, their pointed tips meant to catch the rays of the sun god, Ra, and send the king's spirit upward to join the stars. And oh, how the stars mattered. Above the tombs, the night sky was sacred. The Milky Way was seen as a celestial Nile. Orion was the god Osiris, lord of the afterlife, and the star Sirius marked the flooding of the Nile, a sign of life, death, and rebirth. Every object buried in a tomb had meaning. A cosmetic jar wasn't vanity. It symbolized purification. A mirror wasn't decoration. It represented reflection and clarity of the soul. Even a wooden toy left beside a child was meant to comfort them on the long road beyond. And sometimes, just sometimes, the objects whisper back to us. In one tomb, archaeologists found a board game, Senet, set up as if mid-play, waiting for a hand to make the next move. In another, they found a half-eaten loaf of bread, charred slightly on one edge. A meal, paused for 3,000 years. Even the air in these tombs is different, stale, dry, perfectly preserved, as if time itself is holding its breath. And so the tomb becomes more than stone and treasure. It becomes a message, a time capsule, a love letter from one world to the next. It says, I was here, I lived, and I am not finished yet. The tomb is not the end, it's the beginning. If the tomb was a house for the soul, then the Book of the Dead was its guidebook, its lantern through the darkness. But despite its name, it wasn't a single book, not a bound manuscript, nor a scroll read aloud at funerals. No, the so-called Book of the Dead was something far more extraordinary and far older. It was a living collection of sacred spells and incantations written over centuries, compiled and personalized for the person who had died. No two versions were exactly the same, and despite the name given to it by 19th century archaeologists, the ancient Egyptians called it something far more beautiful: the Book of Going Forth by Day. Because in their belief, death was not about night and silence. It was a journey toward light. From the moment the soul left the body, it entered the Duat, a vast, mysterious underworld filled with rivers of fire, lakes of boiling water, serpent gods, riddles, gates, guardians, and the terrifying chance that your heart would betray you. The Book of the Dead was your survival manual. Spells were carefully chosen for each person. Some were written on papyrus scrolls, painted with vivid reds, blacks, and golds. Others were carved on the tomb walls themselves, and still others were written directly on linen bandages, wrapped tightly around the mummified body so that the spells would stay close to the skin as the journey began. There were spells for opening doors in the afterlife, spells for remembering your name, spells to help the tongue speak in front of the gods, even spells to prevent the soul from dying a second time. One spell, known as Spell 125, is the most famous of all. It describes the moment when the soul enters the Hall of Two Truths and stands before the god Osiris. Here, the heart is weighed on a golden scale, balanced against a single white feather, the feather of Ma'at, goddess of truth, balance, and order. And if the heart is found to be heavy, burdened with lies, cruelty, or regret, it is devoured by a monster named Amit, part lion, part crocodile, part hippopotamus. There is no second chance after that. The soul is gone forever. But if the heart is light, if the soul has spoken truth and walked in harmony, then the journey continues. And it is in that moment, that narrow, sacred moment of judgment, that the Book of the Dead matters most. It includes not just instructions, but confessions, lines for the soul to speak in its own defense. They are called the negative confessions, a list of denials spoken proudly before the gods. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not slain the innocent. I have not caused pain. I have not polluted the river. I have not raised my voice in anger. There are 42 of them, each one addressed to a specific deity, each one a promise of a life lived with balance. And while they may sound ancient, some are strikingly modern. I have not shut my ears to the words of justice. I have not caused hunger. I have not been proud without reason. These were the values that guided a soul through eternity, not gold, not conquest, but kindness, honesty, and respect for the world. The Book of the Dead has been found in fragments, in full scrolls, in faded wall paintings, sometimes packed in jars, sometimes placed beneath the mummy's head like a pillow. Some scrolls are over 70 feet long, filled with painted gods, staircases to heaven, and images of the soul flying like a bird with a human head. And in a few cases, the spells are not for kings or queens, but for scribes, servants, even children, because in Egypt the afterlife wasn't only for the mighty, it was a promise offered to all who lived in harmony with Ma'at. So while the tombs were sealed and the gold was buried, what truly mattered could be spoken: words, spells, truths. The Book of the Dead was not a relic of fear. It was a map of courage, a love song to the soul, so it wouldn't be lost in the dark. And tonight, as we drift gently towards sleep, you might imagine those same stars above the Nile, the same quiet prayers whispered by candlelight, and the same hope. May my heart be light. May my name be remembered. May I go forth by day. There's something deeply human about packing for a journey. You choose the things that matter, the things that remind you of who you are, what you love, and what you might need in unfamiliar lands. The ancient Egyptians believed the afterlife was not unlike this life, only purer, more eternal, a mirror world beyond the veil. So when a pharaoh died, they were not sent into the next world empty-handed. They were buried with everything they might need forever. In the tomb of Tutankhamun alone, over 5,000 individual objects were catalogued, and each one had a purpose. There were 4 ceremonial chariots, some purely symbolic, others fully functional, crafted with cedar wood, bronze, and gold leaf, ready to carry the king across heavenly plains. There were archery bows and arrows, meant to show strength and skill, but also to protect the soul from dangers in the duat, the underworld. There were furniture sets, including a stunningly preserved bed carved in the shape of a lioness, with golden hooves and lapis eyes. Chairs, folding stools, and footrests were stacked like luggage. Some even bore signs of use: scratches, wear, fingerprints. These weren't just symbols. They were real, intimate. And then came the clothing. Pharaohs were buried with sandals, some made of woven papyrus, others of gold, not painted gold, solid gold, delicately hammered to fit the shape of a royal foot, with engraved hieroglyphs on the soles. Why engrave the bottoms of your shoes? Because in the afterlife, every step mattered. And when the king walked, he would symbolically trample the enemies of order and justice. Even the linen tunics were folded and labeled like precious heirlooms. Royal robe of the festival of Opet. Undergarment for the ceremony of the Sed. Everything was organized, as if someone might open the closet at any moment. One of the most personal objects ever found was a handwritten letter tucked beside the mummy of a 3,000-year-old nobleman. It was from his wife. She wrote to him after his death, telling him she missed him and hoped he was happy in the field of reeds. It was folded carefully, a love note left in eternity. Then there were the magical tools. Wands made from hippopotamus ivory, engraved with protective deities, miniature knives to slice through evil spirits, amulets shaped like eyes, scarabs, ankhs, cobras, each one designed to protect a specific part of the soul's journey. The heart amulet was the most sacred of all. Placed over the chest of the mummy, it carried a spell: "Do not let my heart betray me in the hall of judgment." And what is a journey without sustenance? In specially sealed jars, they placed beer and red wine, aged to perfection, honey, still edible after millennia, grains for baking, roasted meats wrapped in linen, figs, dates, garlic, onions, all preserved with care. Sometimes there were model kitchens carved from wood, complete with tiny bakers, brewers, butchers, and servants. These little figurines, called shabtis, were thought to awaken in the next life and take care of the pharaoh's every need. One tomb even included a fishing boat with miniature rowers frozen mid-stroke and fishing lines trailing behind, a symbol of leisure, of peace, of returning to the calm waters of the Nile. And let us not forget the jewelry. Not just decoration, but protection. Necklaces strung with carnelian and turquoise, believed to shield the heart, finger rings engraved with secret names, diadems braided with golden cobras, symbols of divine authority. Everything in the tomb was chosen, not just for beauty, but for meaning. The pharaoh entered the next world as both traveler and king, both soul and symbol, and all around him, packed neatly in alcoves and chests, were the treasures of a life meant to be lived again. Tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine walking into that golden room, dustless, timeless, waiting, not with fear, but with wonder, because the treasures weren't meant to impress. They were meant to comfort, to remind the soul who they were and who they would always be. not lost, not gone, just journeying. To the ancient Egyptians, a person was never just a body, and death was never just an ending. They believed the human being was made of many sacred parts, woven together like threads in a golden tapestry. Some were physical, some spiritual, some eternal. And to journey into the afterlife, every single piece had to be honored. The first was the body itself, the cot, flesh and bone. It had to be preserved because the soul would return to it from time to time. That's why they developed such intricate rituals of mummification. So the body wouldn't rot, wouldn't vanish, wouldn't betray the spirit. But preserving the body was just the beginning. Next came the ka, your vital spark, your life force. It was born with you, and when you died, it didn't die with you. Instead, the ka remained close, hovering near your tomb, waiting to be nourished. That's why food offerings were left daily: bread, beer, oils, dates. Not for show, but because the ka still hungered, still remembered the taste of honey and the sweetness of figs in summer. Without offerings, the ka grew weak, lonely, and so families returned to tombs again and again, whispering prayers, leaving loaves of bread, pouring water over carved names. To feed the dead was to love them. Then came the ba, perhaps the most mysterious part of all. The ba was the soul's personality, its joy, its voice, its memories. It was the part of you that could move between worlds. In art, the ba was drawn as a bird with a human head, sometimes with wings outstretched, as if soaring through dreams. At night, the ba could leave the tomb and visit familiar places: the garden, the temple, the shoreline of the Nile. It could even hover over loved ones, whispering to them in sleep. But by dawn, it had to return to the body. For the soul to remain whole, the bia must reunite with the ka, each day, like the sun, rising again and again. This reunion was sacred. It is why tombs were always designed to face east, toward the first light, so that every morning the ba could find its way home. But even that was not enough, because there was one more part, the most fragile and the most powerful. It was the Ren, your name. To the Egyptians, your name was your essence. If your name was spoken, you lived. If your name was forgotten, you vanished. Entire rituals existed to preserve a pharaoh's name. It was carved into temple walls, painted on tomb ceilings, hidden in amulets and statues. But if a king was disgraced, if he angered the gods or lost the people's faith, his name could be erased, chiseled away, scratched off of history. This was known as damnatio memoriae, the damnation of memory, a second death, one far worse than the first. And so the name had to be protected at all costs. In some tombs, you can find statues of the deceased with their names painted underneath, as if to say, even if my face crumbles, my name will remain. Others had spells written to guard the name itself. May my Ren not be forgotten. May it be spoken by generations yet unborn. May it live as long as the stars shine in the sky. To die was natural, but to be forgotten was the end of everything. That's why pharaohs built pyramids that touched the sky, why priests chanted their names for centuries, why scribes inked their lives onto papyrus scrolls, why tombs were not graves, but monuments to memory. And even now, as we whisper names like Ramses, Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, those souls stir, not awake, but remembered. And tonight, as your body begins to rest, imagine your own spirit, not vanishing but rising. A spark of Ka, a breath of Ba, a name carried softly on the wind. You are more than bones. You are voice. You are story. You are soul. And in the hush, between heartbeats, you are heard. They called him he who knows the secret places, the embalmer, a priest, a surgeon, a magician in linen robes. To the ancient Egyptians, preparing the body for burial was not a task for the living. It was a collaboration with the gods, and no ritual in all of Egypt was more sacred, more mysterious, or more carefully guarded than the ritual of mummification. It began in silence. At the edge of the desert, beyond the hum of the living world, a special tent was raised, a place known as the Ibu, the house of purification. Here, beneath the open sky, the body was bathed in sacred water and anointed with oils, lotus, cedar, cinnamon, frankincense, each drop chosen for its divine properties. The embalmers worked slowly, with hands that did not shake. First they made a small incision on the left side of the body. Then with gentle tools they removed the internal organs, liver, lungs, stomach, intestines, and placed them in 4 carved jars, each protected by a different deity. These were the canopic jars. They were not merely containers. They were guardians. Imseti, the human-headed jar, held the liver. Hapi, with the head of a baboon, guarded the lungs. Duamutef, jackal-headed, held the stomach. And Kebesenuef, the falcon-headed one, protected the intestines. Each jar was sealed, blessed, and placed beside the body for eternity. But there was one organ more dangerous than the rest, the brain. To the Egyptians, it was not the seat of thought. That role belonged to the heart. The brain was soft, imperfect, and potentially harmful to the journey of the soul. So it was removed, carefully, using a hooked instrument inserted through the nose, not in violence, but in ritual. Once emptied, the skull was rinsed with palm wine and stuffed with resin-soaked linen. Then the body was packed with natron, a natural salt harvested from dry lake beds. It drew out moisture, prevented decay, and purified the flesh. For 40 days and nights, the body was left to rest, drying in sacred stillness. And then, the art of wrapping began. This was no hurried task. It could take weeks. Every finger and toe was wrapped individually. Each layer of linen was brushed with warm resin to seal it tight. Amulets were placed between layers, tiny charms of gold and stone, each charged with protective power. An eye of Horus over the forehead, a scarab beetle over the heart, an ankh near the throat, symbol of life everlasting. And all the while, Priests chanted softly, not just prayers, but spells. The ritual was called the opening of the mouth. With a small ceremonial blade, the priest touched the lips of the mummy, symbolically restoring its ability to breathe, to speak, to eat and drink in the next world. The soul could now recognize the body. The body could now receive the soul. Once complete, the mummy was placed inside a series of coffins, each more beautiful than the last. Some were shaped like the human form, with painted eyes and serene expressions. Others were gilded with gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli and obsidian. Tutankhamun's coffin, for example, weighed over 240 pounds of solid gold, and beneath its surface, hidden in hieroglyphs, were spells to protect the pharaoh in fire, water, shadow, and light. Finally, the body was laid to rest inside the sarcophagus, a sacred chest carved from red quartzite or black granite. The lid was sealed, the tomb was closed, and in that moment, life and death shook hands. The embalmer stepped back, the desert wind rose, and the soul began its long sacred journey. The embalmers were never named. Their identities, like the rituals they performed, were swallowed by secrecy. But they were honored, trusted, seen as the gatekeepers between two worlds. Tonight, as you lie still, you might imagine the hush of linen on skin, the scent of myrrh in the air, the flicker of torchlight on gold. Not a ritual of fear, but of love, of preparation, of faith that death is not the end, but the next sunrise. The tomb has been sealed. The soul has journeyed through darkness and flame. The Ba has passed through sacred gates, whispering the names of guardian deities. And now, the final moment arrives: judgment. In the heart of the Duat, beyond all rivers, serpents, and shadowy spirits, stands the place where truth is measured, the Hall of Two Truths. It is not a courtroom of thunder. There is no fire, no rage, only silence and light. The walls shimmer like gold dust under starlight. Pillars rise into an unseen sky, each one engraved with prayers older than pyramids. And at the center of it all, a golden scale rests in perfect stillness. Osiris, lord of the underworld, watches quietly, his skin green as rebirth, his eyes calm, unblinking. By his side, Isis and Nephthys. Behind them, an audience of 42 divine judges, each holding the laws of the universe in their hands. But the moment has already been prepared for. Back in the tomb, the proper spells were spoken, the sacred amulets placed, the body wrapped in linen prayers. And most importantly, the soul has lived with Ma'at. Not perfectly, no soul is perfect, but with care, with balance, with the attempt to walk gently in the world. Now, as the soul steps forward, there is no protest, no pleading, only a hush, so deep it could cradle a heartbeat. The scales are tested, the heart, prepared, protected, and placed in ritual, holds every memory. And though the gods already know its weight, the ceremony must still be witnessed. Truth must be seen. In this moment, even the gods wait. And if the soul is in balance, if the heart speaks no falsehood, and the verdict is not thunder or applause. It is a simple gesture, a nod, a breath, and the gates of paradise open wide. The soul passes through, not as a king, not as a servant, but as something eternal, as one who has remembered who they truly are. They enter a land, not of clouds and harps, but of golden wheat and blue water, fields that never fail, dates that never spoil, songs that never fade. This is the field of reeds, and it waits, not only for pharaohs, but for all who walked in truth. Some say that the soul is given land there to farm as they please, that their loved ones meet them at the edge of a shining river, welcoming them home, that the sun never burns and the night is always kind. In this world beyond the veil, joy is quiet, time is gentle, and nothing is ever taken from you again. Tonight, as your thoughts begin to drift, imagine this place, not heaven, but harmony, a world made not of judgment, but of justice, of reunion, of rest, where your name is still spoken, where your heart is light, and where the gods are silent now, because you have passed. Beyond the weighing of the heart, beyond the judgment of gods and the gaze of Osiris, lies a land whispered of in tomb walls, painted in gold and turquoise, and dreamed of for lifetimes. The ancient Egyptians called it Sekhet Aru, the field of reeds. It was not a myth, not a symbol. It was real to them, as real as the Nile, as real as the wind. And for those who had walked in truth, it was home. Imagine it now, not floating cities or crystal towers, but a perfect Egypt, a mirror of the best parts of the world left behind. Endless green fields lined with golden stalks of grain, tall as a pharaoh's shoulder, waters clear as glass, where lotus flowers bloom in clusters, and the breeze carries the scent of honey and myrrh. The sun is warm, but never burns. The sky is wide, but never empty. Time exists, but never rushes. Here the soul is not king or servant, not young or old. It is simply whole. Some say the soul receives a plot of land to tend, to walk, to shape with love. Others say the soul is greeted by family long lost, embraced at the river's edge by the mother who once held them, or the friend whose name was never forgotten. In this place, everything once broken is quietly restored. The knees no longer ache. The voice never falters. Laughter flows like water. And nothing is feared. Not illness, not loneliness, not the closing of the day. Because here, night does not fall. It rests, and the sun rises not in fire, but in soft gold. The gods still watch, not as judges, but as guardians. They pass silently through the reeds, sometimes visible, sometimes only felt, in the cool breeze, in the ripple of the water, in the shadow of a heron drifting overhead. There are temples here too, made not of stone, but of light, and in them the soul may pray, may dance, may rest. Pharaohs who built entire cities now walk barefoot in quiet gardens, tracing the leaves with their fingers, smiling at things they finally understand. And perhaps, just perhaps, the soul sometimes looks back, not in sorrow, but in gratitude. Gratitude for a life lived in rhythm, gratitude for names remembered, gratitude for the chance to come home. Because that is what the field of reeds truly is. Not reward, not luxury, but home. A place where nothing is lost, where the journey ends, not in forgetting, but in belonging. And so, dear listener, as your breathing softens, as your own mind steps away from the weight of the day, let the field of reeds open gently for you. Let the worries you carried fall like dust from your hands. Let your thoughts dissolve like footprints in sand. Let your spirit float, light as papyrus, into stillness. You are safe. You are held. You are remembered. The gates are open now. The reeds are swaying, and the river is waiting to carry you into rest. And now, my dear dreamer, the journey is complete. You've walked through golden corridors, stood before ancient gods, and crossed the river into a land where nothing is lost, only transformed. May the silence of the tomb bring you peace, and the stillness of the stars above the Nile cradle you as you rest. If your eyes are still open, you can let them fall closed now, softly, like petals at dusk. You don't need to think anymore. The story will keep you company. And if this story brought you calm tonight, I gently invite you to subscribe, so you'll always have a place to return to whenever the world feels heavy. You can leave a comment too if your heart feels like whispering. But for now, just breathe. Let the river carry you. Let the wind remember you. And let your soul rest in the field of reeds until morning. With love and whispers, I'm Anastasia. Good night.